on our stormwater management grant RFP. I see we've got a full house here. I guess people like it when there's money available for stuff. I will begin the presentation now. I will note that I've had some issues earlier this morning with my presentation freezing, so hopefully we won't have that same problem as I start going through it. All right. Is everybody seeing the presentation?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. All right. This is this morning's presentation. It's on our Lakes Stormwater Management Grant RFP. And this information session is designed to provide you with a better understanding of the RFP and what we're looking for and answer any of your questions. Just a little housekeeping issues. Please note the meeting is being recorded. The meeting will be available on our website and YouTube channel for people to view later or people who may have missed this to view. Please mute yourself. It will help the presentation and avoid getting feedback or any other noises or people's pets. We will be taking questions after we go through my presentation on the summary of the RFP and also Jen LeBlayhouse's presentation on how to use Sage to submit a proposal for our review. So basically the outline for the meeting is introductions. I have a slide that'll give you an idea of who's involved in this process. We're going to go through the purpose of the funding priorities, what the eligibility requirements are, request for proposal application, grantee responsibilities. We'll have a SAGE presentation, and then we'll be taking any questions people might have. Questions can be presented live, or they can also be placed in the chat. Here is our team of people who will be working on this. We'll also probably rely on other experts in the department to review folks' proposals as part of our selection process. You can see that the grants program is in the Watershed and Land Management and the Division of Watershed Restoration and Protection. Historically, it had been in the Division of Water Resources. We had a reorganization. We've moved to the Division of Watershed Protection, and we're in the Bureau of Watershed Restoration. Our director is Anika. Catherine Schaefer is the manager. Our people who work on contract administration is Russ Rader and Roxanne Frederick. Some of our grant staff are Howie Nebling, Jen LeBlayhouse, Lisa Swarm, Lynette Lurd, Tony Heater, Brian Carter, and myself, Larry Torok. So if you take a look at what previous efforts we've had in regard to trying to address our water quality issues at lakes, back in 2017, we released a harmful algal bloom response strategy, recognized that we had various water bodies in the state that were suffering from water quality issues, and these were impacting the recreational and public health issues associated with some of these water bodies. We've previously had several efforts at providing funding to address some of these issues. In 2019, approximately $2.5 million in grants were dedicated to have related research projects. Another million was made available for watershed grant funding to look at the planning projects to control non-point source and other sources that contribute to the harmful algal blooms on some of our water bodies. And there was also $10 million made available for sewer and stormwater upgrades to reduce nutrient flows into these water bodies. The funding for this grant is specific to a federal source, which was the American Rescue Plan Act. The funding was provided to the state, and it's in our coronavirus state fiscal recovery fund. As part of the impetus for this project, the Senate approved $10 million in appropriation legislation for public access lake stormwater management grants. Another Senate bill further clarified that these grants were to assist qualified entities to pay for the management of lakes and recreation, or management of lakes for recreation and conservation purposes, to improve water quality and increase recreational access and use of lakes, including projects to control nutrient levels, harmful algal that contribute to the harmful algal blooms. The grants issued pursuant to this section may be used for stormwater non-point source pollution activities. The total amount of funding was $10 million to go out into grants, and then we have $250,000 to help pay for administration of the process. So what I will address now are our funding priority categories. The first one I'll be looking at is our planning categories. We've got two planning categories. The first one is proposals that will develop or implement lake watershed management plans. This is sort of a big picture item, looking to fund very comprehensive efforts to develop plans to address lake water quality. A second proposal, or second category in this section, are proposals to implement stormwater and non-point source pollution plans, focusing primarily on identifying and mapping sources of pollution for the lakes, be they stormwater discharges or perhaps areas where we have riparian buffers that aren't functioning or wetland buffers that aren't functioning. This was modeled after a category that we had in the Barnegat Bay RFP several years ago, and it seemed to prove somewhat successful. Another category that we have is the development of green infrastructure projects. Here's an example of a couple of green infrastructure projects. We've got a rain garden, and we also have some porous paving in a parking lot. This once again is another category that has been prevalent in our 319 grants and has generated projects that have been successful in reducing pollution. One of our next category is projects that will improve existing stormwater management structures. The idea is to retrofit them, to improve, it's not my dog, improve water quality, reduce nutrient loading, and perhaps take some of these basins and modify them to reduce stormwater velocities and volumes. We do have predictions that increased rainfall is going to be occurring in northern parts of the state. Modifying basins could help address this and eliminate some of these problems. Another funding category that we've proposed is projects that will restore and improve water quality through improving the functions of riparian zones or wetland transition areas. Projects should incorporate sufficient funding for monitoring of success if it involves planting of vegetation. Here's an example of a riparian restoration area. We also will make funding available for lake dredging and vegetation management projects. These projects should provide some demonstration of a connection to the proposed activity and how it will help to improve the water quality conditions in the selected lake or water body. And our final priority category is sort of a broad catch-all type of category that can address a number of various activities that could affect water quality of a lake. You know, some of these may include maintenance of projects that have already been implemented. We have people who are monitoring stream water quality, but some of their monitoring equipment is failing or might need to be replaced. It's a category that we can help to continue these projects that are already in place. Other activities that can fall under this category include the control of wildlife that can contribute to declining water quality, efforts to control muck within lakes, and also efforts to improve water quality functionings at any marinas that may be on some of these water bodies in relation to boating. The RFP has a listing of various categories or actions that we wouldn't fund. One of these is projects that will control pollutants, but are maybe already required through other regulations. Projects that would result in educational behavior or promote stewardship, maintenance activities that would be required, and the purchase of promotional items would not be funded through this. Eligible project requirements, if the project is proposed, it has to be allowed proposed on public property, or if it is on a private property, it have to be an agreement with the property owner. Some of these water bodies have multiple ownership folks, so there may be some overlap with private property that might need to get permission. They would have to be consistent with local, state, and federal requirements and need to be able to obtain permits. They should be well designed to achieve the project goal. They shouldn't include construction or proposals. For proposals not include construction, the proposals must include deliverables such as reports, outreach products, inventories. They must be able to be completed in the grant period. That's pretty important. And there needs to be some demonstration of improvements to water quality. You know, the object of this money is to try to assist in improving the water qualities of these lakes and get these lakes to function better for recreational and conservation purposes. The eligibility requirements that are listed in the RFP were based upon those that were developed in the legislation that served as an impetus to the project. Eligible parties that were called out included the Greenwood Lake Commission, the Lake Hopatcong Commission, local government units, an entity established as a joint meeting. It actually should be in a joint meeting pursuant to law, or an entity established pursuant to ordinance by the municipality surrounding the publicly accessible lake for the management of that lake, or a nonprofit organization recognized by the Internal Revenue Service and whose mission is to manage the management of a publicly accessible lake. The RFP included an appendix that had listings of lakes. This appendix is not 100% representative of all the lakes that are in New Jersey. We thought that it would be important to at least have some measure and identification of lakes that would qualify. The appendix that we generated was built off of a effort by the Division of Fish and Wildlife to identify fishing lakes. It was a handy data set to use because it did have ownership information. The tax record information we had was a little incomplete, so I couldn't really generate a list off of that. I did notice that the metadata for this GIS product, indicated that there were upwards of 400 public lakes in New Jersey. I believe the appendices only identify 173 in the publicly managed lake section. So there are probably additional lakes out there. I know I've been contacted by a number of people about the status of their lake. So if your lake is listed on this, it doesn't mean it's not an eligible, publicly accessible water body. It just didn't meet the data set that we used. Any questions can be sent to us and we can verify the status of it. The second appendix was developed to try to identify a set of lakes that were associated with overburdened or underserved communities. This is a factor that was called out as an important issue to be applied in our funding source, and it also contributes to the scoring of a particular application if it is associated with underserved communities. The model that we used to sort out that list was water bodies that were within overburdened communities, which is a GIS product that the state has developed, or those that were within a mile of such communities, with the thought process that those would likely receive heavy use from nearby communities. The grant processing timeline, this was taken from the RFP. We are currently accepting proposal applications until May 28th. Funding recommendations are expected to be made by August 24th of 2022. We will try to return completed grant agreements within 30 days of the August date. The funding source itself from the federal government, all funds that were obligated under this grant have to be, or provided under this grant have to be obligated by December 31st, 2024, and the funds must be expended by December 31st, 2026. The categories of funding that were outlined in the RFP, we've made available $2 million for water quality planning, $3 million for stormwater management, for management and restoration efforts, $3 million. Greenwood Lake and Lake Apacong have $2 million, but no more than $1 million either lake. The total grant funding is $10 million. We anticipate that these funds may be moved around if all of the categories don't expend their allotted funds. But our intent is to fully obligate the $10 million. Mm-hmm. Some grantee responsibilities. There's a larger list within the RFP itself, but I tried to highlight some of the major ones. There's a quarterly reporting process for financial reports. These will be submitted, obviously, to the department on quarterly. The RFP may suggest that the financial reports needed to be submitted monthly. It appears that the state has to submit monthly reports to the federal government, but grantees will not be obligated to provide us with monthly data. The quarterly reports, which would provide both financial and progress reports, will be sufficient. There will be a water quality data collection requirement for applicable projects. Some of these may require a full-blown quality assurance plan. Others, it may be a lesser requirement. It will depend on the nature of the grant and what the goals of the project are. Grantees are responsible for ensuring that the project is completed and submitting a final report. Any GIS product that's generated by one of our grants must be provided to the department. If there is a need for maintenance of any of the products of the proposed of the funded projects, maintenance agreement must be set into place. There are some, because it is federal money, there are some restrictions. I believe it's Appendix F that sort of goes over some of this because of the federal requirements. And it can't be Appendix F. Appendix F is final reports, so it might be, maybe it's G. The grantee must submit a final report. In regard to how we're going to select projects, we have a scoring criteria set up. It has 5 categories of project applicability, project readiness, likelihood of success, if there's any cost sharing involved, and monitoring and evaluation. This can get relatively detailed, so I'm not going to go into the whole part here. You can refer to the RFP for additional details on our scoring process. The selection process is fairly comprehensive. You know, we have the project evaluation that are used to score the proposals. A DEP staff will evaluate the proposals and review and scores. We'll be working with our peers in other programs to fully evaluate the received proposals. Scores will be compiled and ranked. They are submitted up through the director. They go through the assistant commissioner, and they also go through the commissioners. So it's a fairly rigid and comprehensive process to ensure that we do fund the best projects, and it's not just, you know, throwing darts at a board. So here's my contact information. You know, I don't think people use snail mail all that much anymore, but there's the mailing address. I do have phone numbers. One is an office phone, one is a cell phone. You can reach me on either of those. We are working flex time, so I'm not always in the office. We have a special email address where emails can be sent to that will specifically be set aside for this grant, and so that's a handy place to go through to it. And then what I will now do is I will turn the screen over to Jen so that she can run us through her SAGE presentation.
Okay, thanks, Larry. I will share my screen, hopefully. Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Okay. So, hello, my name is Jennifer Niblejas, and today I will show you how to navigate DEP's electronic grant management system called NJDEP SAGE. This will be our 3rd RFP using the system, so if you applied for the Water Quality Restoration Grant Program the last 2 RFP cycles, then you are in great shape because we will be using the same application structure. If you have any questions as I go through my presentation, please put them in the chat. So I first want to point out that other state departments use a similar stage system, such as the New Jersey Department of Community Affairs, which they call Green Sage, and the state of New Jersey, which they call Blue Sage. The Blue Sage houses the Department of Transportation, the Department of Health, and other state departments, but DEP's SAGE system is independent and is not connected to these other systems. So today I want to walk you through the website where you can you hear
someone has their mic on. There we go.
Okay. Today I would like to walk you through the website where you can find the link to the system, how to register an organization, how to add members to your organization, how to apply and submit the grant application, and some management tools that are within the system. So this is the Lake Stormwater Management Grants website. You can click on these two NJDEP SAGE hyperlinks to access the system. And I added some step-by-step instructions in this location. And also after today's session, we will post the presentations and the recording in this section also. Next is how to register an organization. If you are a registered organization already, you will use the same username and password. Only new organizations that have not used the system should register, and only eligible applicants will be approved. So consultants can be added as members of the organization later. When you click on the NJDEP SAGE hyperlink on the website, it takes you to the welcome page of the system. There are registration instructions located here, and then you click here or new user to fill out the required information to register. Once it is complete, you hit the save button, and this will submit the request, and you will receive an email that it was submitted. Please note it may take up to 72 hours for the department to accept the registration. So if you go back to the welcome page, there is a section for vendor ID. If you do not have a vendor ID, you must register through NJ Start. And then after you have been accepted in the system, you will need to add members to your organization. On the home page, you will click on My Organizations. On this page, make sure that your organization information is correct. You will then add your vendor ID number in this location and your DUNS number in this location. And once everything is complete to your satisfaction, you click on the Save button. Next, click on Organization Members. This lists all the current members in the system. To add new members, click on the Add Members hyperlink, then click on New Member. And then you will fill in the person's information with a default username and password. You will select a role for them, either authorized official, or which gives them initiate, edit, and submittal rights, or viewer, which only allows them to view the documents. And then once complete, click on the Save and Add to Organization button. Some key points to remember are, at a minimum, you must have the contact person or executor of the grants, the financial officer, and the project manager added as members of your organization. This will be needed for the application. If there is a consultant helping you with the application, you can also add them as members also. Next, you must email each person their default username and password. The system will not notify them. And then the members can change their username and password under the My Profile section on the homepage. Now I will show you how to apply and submit an application. On the homepage, you will go to View Available Opportunities and then click on the View Opportunities button. You will then search for the grant you want to apply to. And in this case, it would be the Lakes Management 2022. You will click on the Filter button, and then the opportunity will show up. And then you will click on the Apply Now button. This is the application document. So to go to the application forms, you would hover or click on the Forms menu. And then all the pages of the application will show up. You must click on each page of the application and then fill in the required information. And once complete, don't forget to click the Save button. And then I recommend clicking the Save button and then to ensure that the information was saved and you have no errors, and then clicking the Next button to get to the next page. If you click on the Save Next button, you will automatically be put on the next page, and it won't let you know if there are any errors on the previous page. So when each page has been completed in the application without any errors, you will go to Status Changes and then click the Apply Status button under Application Submitted. If you decide not to proceed with the grant application, please click the Apply Status button under Cancel Application. So to return to an application that you have not submitted yet, you can go back to the home page, and then the My Tasks section will be visible. You can click on Open My Tasks, and then you would search for the document that is in process. For that is Lakes 2022 ABC 008. You'll click on that document name, and this will take you back to where the Forms menu is available. In addition, you can go to the My Applications tab and then search for the document here. Okay. So lastly, I want to show you some management tools in the system. So if you go back to the application documents, you will go to the Management Tools section. And then 3 tools that might be helpful is to create a full print version. And this will download a PDF of the completed grant application. Create full blank print version, and this downloads a blank application. And then add edit people. And if you click on that hyperlink, It takes you to the page that lists all the members of your organization. If there is no check mark next to a person's name, this means that the person is not associated with this document, so they will not be able to see the documents or receive any notifications. So please double check that you have the appropriate people you want assigned to the documents by check marking their name and then hitting the save button. If a person has left your organization, you can uncheck their name and hit the save button. Or conversely, you can keep the check mark and just put a end date under the active dates and then clicking save. So some key points to remember in this section is if you add members to the organization after you initiated a grant application, those members will not be automatically associated with the document. You will have to go to Management Tools, add Edit People, and then make sure their name is checkmarked. The My Task section on the homepage will appear only when there is an action that is needed by the applicant or grantee to perform. So if you have an application in process, or later down the line, if you get selected, if the grant agreement needs to be filled out by you, then it would be listed on your My Task section. And then for the narrative section of the application, it is best to copy and paste from a Word document. And then make sure that you save each page of the application and it contains no errors. When the application is complete, you can go to Status Changes and hit the Apply Status button underneath Application Submitted, and this must be done before midnight, May 28th. And then the best browsers to use are Google Chrome or Edge. So this is my contact information. If you have any questions on the system, or if the system is giving you problems, you can contact me, and I'm pretty available to help you out. And then I can go to sort of a live demo of the system. Okay. If there are any questions. Let's
Jen, was there your contact information didn't seem to pop up? Was there another?
Oh no. Oh, sorry.
No, it looks like it froze on key points.
Oh no. It's on the website, and I don't know if I could go back. Sorry. Oh, there you go. Does it show up now?
Oh, there it goes.
Perfect. Okay, so I think it would be helpful to maybe look at each page of the application. So I'm just going to start a new one. Hopefully this is live, so hopefully there's not so much of a delay. Again, you would go to the Forms menu, open up each page of the documents, fill out. This information is carried over from your organization information. And then you would select the contact person, fiscal and project manager, click the save button, and their title, phone, and email will populate. This is what I was afraid of. So there's the information, partner information. You could put your consultants, subcontractor, match partners, and then hit the save button. Project details, these are the project categories, and you would select the one that you're applying to. You would put a title. For this RFP, since there is sort of a tight deadline of when the money needs to be spent, we do need a start date and end date. I think it's 2026 that
Yeah,
the money needs to be spent.
Yeah, it looks like you might have froze up again because
Oh,
it's the screen is still showing the first page, I believe.
okay.
It seems it's working fine for me.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. It's not frozen for me.
Huh.
Oh,
Then never mind. Oh, it just changed.
okay. So you could put a start date and date or 06/01, 2026. And then the total grant amount is the amount that you're requesting. The match is either in kind or cash. In our world, in kind means volunteer time only. If you have salary, supplies, donations, those would all be considered cash match. So you would put the amount here. So that's the distinction between the two. Other funding, if let's say there's remediation action or anything like that, you can put the other types of funding in this category right here, and then click the save button. If you don't fill out all the required information, an error message will show up. You can go to the next project location. You would select the county or counties if you hold the control key down. And then a municipality. And then click the save button. So if you know the block and lot numbers, that's always helpful for us to know where the project will be located, but it's not required. You would select the watershed management area and click the save button. And then the legislative congressional district will be populated based on your county and municipality. You can click the next button. The assessment unit numbers is kind of related to HUC 14. This is based on the 2016 303 listing. And so you would check mark which HUC 14 assessment unit number it's associated, the project is located in, and then what the pollutant is. You would if the project is implementing like a watershed plan or a water quality management plan, you can put the name of it here. If you don't have any, you could put non-applicable. What water body is associated with this, and then if there is a TMDL for that water body. Also, you can put non-applicable if it doesn't pertain to you. Then you can click next. And then best management practices, what kind of projects are you doing? What are the sources of non-point source pollution? What implementation projects exactly are you going to implement? Primary pollutant targeted. And then you can click the save button. or next. And then this is the meat of the proposals, which is the backgrounds, what your goals and objectives are. How are you as an applicant and your experience with grants? If there's going to be any water quality monitoring, yes, no, and an evaluation information. Some handy thing you can make the boxes bigger if you need to. And then for this RFP, we don't necessarily need to report load reductions. For the 319 program. We do because EPA requires it, but this is a separate source of funding, so load reductions may not be necessary. And then the next is your implementation schedule and budget. So your objectives, your tasks, your deliverables, who's going to be responsible for that task, the timeline, the start month, the end month. This is numerical, so month 1 to month 12 will be this task. It's not a date field. And any grant or match money that's associated with that task. You can add extra objectives if you need to, and you can add extra tasks by clicking the plus symbol. I believe there's 10 objectives that we allow in the system. You can click the next button. And then the budget details. You should put in information on how you came up with the budget numbers. So if there's salary, you would put the employee's name, their hours devoted to this project, their salary or hourly rate, just so that we have an idea of your numbers. And then in-kind cash and other funding. And then lastly, there's the supplemental information, which is any letters of resource commitment, any maps, or any other type of document you want us to look at while we review the proposal. And then if you hover over the forms menu, you can see I have some errors, which is the hand symbol. So I have to go back to those pages. If there's a pencil, the page has been edited and there doesn't seem to be any errors. And if it's just this type of symbol, then you didn't edit the page or put in any information. So you'll need to go back to the page. And then once complete, you submit the application. So I hope this is helpful. Again, you can contact me with any issues you may have. And I will stop sharing.
Thanks, Jen.
Yeah.
Hopefully that'll be good for people. And I think it being in the recording will be very helpful because folks will be able to go back to that and go through it. So that ends our presentation side of the session. I guess we can move to questions that people have. If you have a live question, put your hand up. We'll also review those that are in the chat section. I guess start with the live ones. John, you have a question?
Yes, John Yakimic, Boswell Engineering. Municipal engineer in a community. I have a lake that's solely privately owned and only access to its members. However, I have runoff from public infrastructure that affects the lake. Would this lake be eligible for this grant?
I don't think it would be based upon the way the language was structured. They're public funds. I think the intent was to really focus and expend them on issues that involve public lakes. So I would think that a private lake, as described, probably wouldn't be eligible for funding, even though the source of the pollution may be public.
Okay, thank you.
Any other hands up? John, your hand's still up. Kathleen?
Hi, thank you. My name's Kathleen Kerwin. I work for Rutgers Cooperative Extension and been working with the community in Egg Harbor Township, trying to come up with a goose management plan. They have two retention ponds on the property. They are technically publicly accessible. It's a public road. And the overall goal is to install a living shoreline that would prevent goose access, which would in turn improve water quality and also include native habitat. But since it's not a lake, it's these two ponds. Just not sure if that qualifies or not.
Yeah, I would. The way that the eligible lakes were structured, or the eligibility of the water bodies were structured, it was, defined as publicly accessible lakes that have conservation and recreation aspects. I mean, if these were facilities that drained into a publicly accessible lake, they, might be eligible. But I don't think independently the ponds themselves would meet the eligible water body requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Alex?
Yeah, hi. I just want to follow up on that first question regarding public infrastructure on a private lake. I want to maybe get a little more clarity from you, or maybe challenge you on that a little bit. We have the same problem with many of the lakes in our town. They're privately owned, and they are drainage basins, for lack of a better term, for many of our streets and roads that do not have proper sediment traps. And in many cases, these lakes will feed or be fed by various streams and rivers that are category 1, so highly sensitive, and of course on the DEP's radar. Are you sure that there is no opportunity for improvement of drainage facilities that are publicly owned by the town that happen to drain into a private lake? Are we sure that's something that's not eligible?
Once again, I have to refer back to the way that eligible water bodies was defined, and they were specifically called out as publicly accessible. So if the water bodies themselves aren't publicly accessible, it doesn't seem to me that they would meet that criteria.
Even if there's a downstream element from it that is publicly accessible?
That may fall within a gray area in regard to the location of the lake versus it being within the watershed of a publicly accessible lake. If you want to send us an email, defining that specific situation, we can take a look at it and get a ruling.
Okay, because it's one of the worst. I think it's one of the biggest challenges we have in our town is many of our lakes that are man-made are dying. We're losing depth. They're becoming the sediment trap for the public infrastructure. And I think, I'm sure the DEP cares about that. Maybe the wording of this grant should be considered the next time it comes around, or something like that in this regard.
Well, it was based on the way the legislation, the money obligating legislation was structured. So it seems that, their intention, at least for this pot of money, was to really focus on water bodies that are serving a public purpose and that are providing public recreation. The issue that you're raising could possibly get picked up under some of our other grant opportunities, under the 319 program. I'm just not sure it's matches well with the criteria that this one is working under.
But just to follow up on what I was thinking, so say for just changing the idea a little bit, we certainly have some drainage infrastructure that drains directly into Category 1 streams by some way. I'm assuming that would be eligible since it is in a sense, a public water body.
Well, it's
Right.
lakes. It's not streams.
Oh, so it can't be. So even Category 1 streams would be out of the.
Right. Yeah, this is remember it's the lakes stormwater management bill, not so it really was focused on, and it spooled off of our continuing HAB situations and other issues of these water bodies facing declining water quality. We have probably other opportunities where that type of water quality project would fit better. I think this one really was focused on specifically on lakes and their particular issues.
Okay, thank you for your time.
I think Dennis is next.
I don't see any more hands.
Well, he didn't. There's a Dennis that with no last name listed.
Oh.
I think he was next.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, Dennis Percher with the South Mountain Conservancy. We oversee the South Mountain Reservation. The West Branch of the Rawway River flows through the reservation, and it's dammed, and part of that is the Orange Reservoir, which is not a lake per se, but it's a reservoir. It has public access. There's a recreational paddle boats and so forth. Does that count under this grant?
It would appear based on your description. I assume that I mean there are reservoirs listed in the representative list that we provided. I assume this one isn't, I guess, right?
I haven't gone through the list actually.
Okay.
So.
You could send me. I would send an email, because what I'll do is I tend to look up all the water bodies and see what their status is and their location and what how they're listed as recreational. It sounds on your description that it would meet it, and I think it sounds familiar to me. I may have already responded to perhaps someone else about this water body.
The Rawway River Watershed Association may have sent you something.
Right, but there's no harm in sending in an email, and I can we can investigate it and give you an answer.
That'll be great. Yeah, probably more characterization and implementation, because we really don't have a handle on it. There are feed water pumping stations of Orange that's affected by the level of the reservoir, but there's also recreation and a waterfront area. Thank you.
Claire Moriarty.
Hi, yes. My name is Claire Moriarty. I work with ENLP and working on a design for a site that's on Lake Hopakong. So I have two questions. My first one is, I know that we stated earlier that maintenance activities are not eligible for this project, but for our design, we're proposing pervious pavement, which is normally the efficiency of that BMP is linked to regular maintenance. So I was wondering if the purchase of maintenance equipment would be eligible and not the actual activities, regular maintenance activities for this.
Possibly. I think so are you suggesting that the proposal would include the installation of impervious pavement and then equipment to maintain it, or is the pavement already in and the equipment would be used to maintain it?
We would propose the pervious pavement and then also the equipment to maintain that pervious pavement.
I mean, my initial reaction is I think that's applicable. if you would like me to investigate it or us to investigate it more, if you want to send a quick email about it, we could check into that.
Great. My second question is, so for this project, we are pursuing multiple sources of funding. Some are other DEP grants, and they do have overlapping goals, but kind of different timelines for scheduled completions. So I was wondering if there's a suggested way to deal with this, whether it's like coordinating with DEP specifically, just because I want to make sure that we're meeting all the requirements if we do have multiple sources of funding.
Are you thinking as presenting it as part of presenting it as a match for this application as scoring, or just it's a bigger project that has multiple sources of funding?
Yeah, it's a bigger project, so we're trying to, find many different grants that could potentially work for it. So they, not all of them have the same completion time as this one. So I wasn't sure how that will work if we are getting separate funding, because we did already receive a water quality grant from DEP for this project.
Is the aspect of the project that funding from this source would be applied to definable, or is it something that this funding could only maybe fund a portion of it and the additional funds would be needed to complete it?
The latter.
That's a good question. I guess once again, I'd recommend that you send us an email about that so we can decipher it a little bit better.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Barbara Robinson.
Yes, I had a question. If there is a publicly accessible lake in a different town and you have a stream feeding off of it or water, would that be eligible?
So the project would be within the watershed of a publicly accessible lake.
Yeah, but we don't own the publicly accessible lake.
Right. Publicly accessible. So it would be, so to say the lake is in Morris Township and the stream area that you're concerned about is in Harding. Would Harding be the municipality applying for the money?
Yes.
I don't know. I don't think we discussed that type of scenario before, Catherine, have we?
Okay. Well, let me confirm that the creek is actually coming off the lake, and I'll send you an email.
That would be good.
Okay. Thank you.
Christy McDonald is next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christy with Raritan Headwaters Association. I'm currently working with Chris Abrupta on a watershed restoration and protection plan for Bud Lake. We're still not finished, but we're moving forward, and we do have the impervious cover assessment reduction action plans, which identifies several shovel-ready projects. While we're still developing the plan, would we be able to apply for this funding to implement aspects of the plan?
I would think that if the individual projects fall within the categories that we've outlined, I don't think the completion of the plan would be mandatory to fund those independent projects. I mean, they would have merit. I mean, it certainly is beneficial to have, even a draft plan or being tied to the draft plan. But I don't think it would. The fact that the plan hasn't been completed would preempt you from applying for funding for individual projects that are
Okay.
sort of a component of it.
And it is under the 2019 319H HABs funding that we're doing that restoration plan.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
I don't see any other hands raised.
Do we have any supplementary questions in the comments section? But of
Yeah.
course.
Okay. The first question was, did I see a slide that included wetlands are included?
Right. I saw you put a response in there. I think it wasn't so much wetlands. I think, as you had indicated, it was transition area restoration. With the the concept is that the improvement of riparian buffers and wetland buffers that will assist in reducing non-point source loading to the wetland and eventually the waters and the lakes. So I think that was the connection. I guess it might. I don't know if you were going to enhance a wetland, whether that would be preemptive. I think if it had demonstrable water quality improvement attributes or goals, I think that would be the same as improving the wetland buffer. So I don't know if actions in a wetland would be precluded from that category. You have any thoughts on that, Catherine?
I think it depends on the individual proposal and what they're doing. Right. The next question is, I read an earlier slide too quickly. The slide saying what is not allowed. Did it say projects involving best management practices / manufactured treatment devices would not be allowed or considered?
Yeah, I might have mixed up the nons and the nos in that. I went back and looked at that slide, and it says that you are supposed to be using best management practices. So if the message came across and it's on tape, so I guess the evidence would be there. The intention, it was not. It shouldn't have been a no. It should have been that they should be applying best management practices.
Can a lake management plan be completed without a lake characterization plan if there is a list of lakes in need of watershed plan or updates?
Yeah, I don't. I would have to. I think I want to think about that one a little bit. But my initial reaction is I'm not sure we would require a complete characterization plan. I know within the appendix of the RFP, I believe we have a listing of impaired lakes since it was sort of carried over from some of the 319 grant availability and appendices. So I will, if the person who submitted that question would like to send it in as an email, I think we could prepare a more complete response to that question.
You mentioned and the RFP states that the Lake Hopatcong Commission and Greenwood Lake Commission are eligible for up to $1 million in funding. However, there are other entities that work to improve Lake Hopatcong and Greenwood Lake. Would nonprofits, i.e. the Lake Hopatcong Foundation and the surrounding municipalities / counties that may have projects related to each respective lake also be, I'm sorry, my screen it was on two screens. The counties that may have projects, would also be eligible for funding under this specific category. Assuming they are eligible, would the proposed projects of these other organizations count as part of the $1 million allocated to Hopatcong or Greenwood Lake?
I mean, I think when this table was put together, that we were looking at that pool of money specific to those two lakes, which reduces the level of competition that those applications would go through, since those were two lakes that were highly valued by the legislature when they were going through the development of the appropriations bill and the lakes management legislation. The money, so sitting here, I'm thinking that those caps relate to all projects that would be associated with those lakes. There is potential that those caps could be exceeded if funding from other categories isn't fully expended, and there are opportunities to fund similar projects or appropriate projects on those two water bodies. That's sort of my read now. If I can investigate that further through our group and get back to that person. I mean, did they identify themselves in the chat?
Yeah. Yes.
So we can move it off of that. Go ahead.
The person who had the question wants to raise their hand. So go ahead, Aaron.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi, good morning. Yeah, I just wasn't sure. I wanted to confirm, to double check with you guys via email, what the best email address to use would be.
Probably the non-point source pollution email, because that allows all of us to access it. If you send it to, say, me individually, it would only get to me, and sometimes the emails lose context with me if they drift on too far down my screen. But if it's in our specific box, it's easier to address that way. And I think that was the email address that we provided on the contact.
Okay, thank you.
How far back can relevant activities be counted as match?
Do we have any, do you or Jen know if we have any history in regard to how we look at match funds under, say, 319?
They're only like give you extra points required.
And I'm thinking aren't they usually a component of the actual projects that's being applied for? It sounds like it's going back to historical match. Yeah, I think it's sort of the normal conventional understanding of matches is it's sort of it's combined to fund help fund the larger projects that perhaps the one individual funding source couldn't fund or may be difficult to fund. I think trying to apply a historic match doesn't really, sort of violates that structure or view. So I'm not sure. I would think that you can't really apply historical funding.
Okay. Can a single proposal include both implementation and planning elements? Parentheses, implementation of a shovel-ready project and planning of a different activity, or should those be broken into separate proposals?
This is something that we discussed yesterday, and I think that, I was of the opinion that I kind of like to have them in separate categories, but then that generates two sets of paperwork. I think there are two ways to do it. You could apply individually for each of the proposed activities by category, or I think, and Jen, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Sage allows you to put in more than two categories for an individual application, but I think we would like to see the costs broken up by the projects category. This in part will help us with, assessing how we're expending funds under particular categories. And also if we get to a situation where the project has, it has lots of positive benefits, but we may not be able to fund all of what's presented, it would give us the option to perhaps negotiate, a different final funding level. I think that answers. I think that's sort of the way we had decided to try to address that question.
Yeah, I would just add, if you are planning on combining the two on maybe the objectives and tasks page of the application, you would break out an objective would be planning and all the tasks associated with that and their budget for that. And then another objective would be implementation and all the tasks associated with that with the budget numbers, so that we can kind of look at it separately if we can't fund all of it.
Jack Stepanski, did you have your hand raised to follow up with that question?
Yeah, no, I was actually, Jennifer actually cleared that up pretty well. So I was going to say, can we just separate them out by objective? Because I think that solves the paperwork issue as well as the separating out the budget issue. So thank you.
There's an Emily Bajuras, terrible with names, that has her hand raised now.
Hi, yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I had a follow-up question regarding the match. So if a design was previously completed that would aid the implementation of a project we're applying for under this application, would that be allowed for a match?
I cannot give a definitive answer on that. We would have to look at how we have viewed matching funds in the past. Like I indicated, my familiarity is matching funds are sort of built into, the individual project as it's being enacted. This is different from that, and I don't want to totally say no, only because I don't know if I've been asked that specific type of question before. So once again, if you want to provide us with some details on this specific situation in an email, we can assess it and give you feedback.
But just a match is not a requirement. Just to let that be known. It's not a requirement.
Gotcha. And I actually had a second question. And I might have read this wrong, but I thought I saw under the projects that are not eligible for funding slide, something about an education component not being eligible. If we have one of our objectives as an education component, but it's not the entirety of the application, would that be allowed, or how would you deal with that?
Let's see, projects have potential to resolve negative impacts. I think it was more focused on promotional actions, promotional products, rather than an educational aspect. So I don't believe that would be, let's see. Yeah, I think it got, once again, I think it was a factor of I think I stumbled through the one Projects that do not control the input of non-point source pollutants, either through the implementation of best management practices or through education that changes behavior or promotes stewardship. Projects that do not control.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe that's worded a little strangely.
If a consultant or contractor is to be used for the project, will the applicant be required to follow federal procurement regulations? If so, can you share the details of the policy for clarification?
I don't.
think
There are
state.
certain. Yeah, I think it might be specific to the project. I know there are certain standards that apply to this overall award because of its size that don't carry down to the individual grant outputs. So, if I would say take a look at what we have in the appendix of the RFP, and if if that question still seems to be outstanding, if you want to submit it to us.
I agree, but I think this, the money is coming from us as the state, not from the federal government to the grantee. So I do not think that requirement, what you're looking for, it's just going to be state procurement requirements. And that is all the questions that were not, I mean, there was a couple, like the website's email address, they were all answered in the chat, which they're easier to have links than me to say that. And thank you for clarifying that we had the wrong email address in our RFP. We missed the S in grants. We do have one more hand raised now. Emily Bennett.
Hi, good morning. It's Erin Bennett from Princeton Hydro. Just had not a follow-up question, but additional question to the ones I placed in the chat. I was wondering if the same project that was submitted for the most recent round of 319 funding can also be submitted for this program as long as it meets the grant requirements.
So it was a project that was submitted but wasn't funded through 319?
Well, we haven't the most recent round, so the awards haven't been granted yet.
It might get a little awkward if you end up getting funded by 319, but I guess there's no harm in it. No. Certainly, if you end up getting funds awarded earlier than we complete this process, it would negate us having to further evaluate that project. But I don't think there's any harm in doing that.
I agree, especially if you wanted to start the process to be ready and maybe hold off on the actual submittal until closer to the deadline, in case you hear back from us about those.
Okay, great. Thank you. And sorry, just one more question. The RFP mentions that funds can be used for the development or implementation of lake watershed-based protection plans or the development of lake stormwater non-point source management inventories. Can funds be used to conduct a feasibility study and/or create an engineering design that results in a shovel-ready, permit-ready plan? Or must funds be used for implementation or construction only?
My initial reaction is I think we're looking for shovel-ready projects, but it can be a two-step process, and I don't know if I want to definitively say that wouldn't be appropriate. So I send that question in through as an email. We can take a look at it. Some of these things I want to, we have partners with DCA because they're the holders of the money also, and we have an agreement with them. So I would want to take a look at what the conditions of that MOA are and what limitations that may put on the types of projects.
Okay, thank you.
Appendix D lists lakes that are the focus for characterization development. Is this a representative list? And may other lakes not on the list qualify for characterization development?
I don't know if we're limited to that list. I think Kim Seno's still not here, is she?
Kim, did you pop in?
She was here earlier. I'm not sure if that's a complete list or not. It may be. I would have to look at that more carefully to register the intent. It was something that we carried over to assist in providing opportunities under this grant. We may not be bound specifically to the same level and standards. So I would have to take a look at that. If you have a specific lake that you're looking at and want to send us an email on it, it would be helpful.
That's all the questions from the chat.
Do we have any other interested parties out there who have a question or a thought that relates to this? I think has our crowd decreased?
Yes.
Well, if we don't have any other questions regarding the RFP, there we go. Heather?
Hi, sorry, just wanted to quickly clarify on the lakes characterization. And I know I sent you an email on this, and so you can feel free to respond to that later, but just does it require also to have the restoration side of it included in the plan, or can it be a lake characterization only? And as I said, feel free to respond to the email instead.
Yeah,
that's if you want to think on that.
Right, because I mean, the way it has been structured in the past, it had specific goals and objectives driven by EPA requirements. We're not in as rigid a situation, but I also think that I also would not want to have money spent on something that generates a plan that maybe then isn't applicable or for additional funding in the future under a different grant program. So I want to, and or one that we don't receive information that we can use in the future. So there's a number of questions I think I would like to see how best to balance before really responding to that. Is there anything else? I see a little dot on the chat. I don't know if that's a question. Well, is Heather's hand still up, or is that a new one? No, that wasn't.
No. I'm trying to lower it, but it won't let me.
Well, I guess if no one has any more topics they would like to, or questions they would like to bring up, I guess we can finish this up. I appreciate everyone coming and showing interest in this. I'm hoping to get a really good set of projects and proposals that address lingering issues and can help us get to some of the root causes of our declining water quality. If additional questions come to mind after this, please send us an email and we will try to address them. But outside of that, I think we can. I think we're going to end the session. Thanks everyone for coming. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Larry.
Thanks, Larry.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Catherine.
Guess I should wait for everyone else to hang up before I hang up.